Welcome to Australia 24 News. And now, a brief report on the Bangladesh election. First, the headlines. Sheikh Hasina wins a third term in the Bangladesh election marred by deadly violence and vote rigging, which may create greater legitimacy crisis for the ruling party, the Awami League. A leaked document reveals an elaborate plan and government strategy to rig the election. All opposition parties of Bangladesh rejected the election and demanded a fresh election under a neutral authority, and heavy criticism from the international community about the election rigging. Now in details. Bangladesh's ruling party, the Awami League, won the 11th national parliamentary election held on December 30th, 2018. But the victory has severely been marred by the credible reports of widespread systematic vote rigging, which yields a result that was unprecedented and unlikely. In some places, more than 99% of the votes cast were in favor of the Awami League, whereas the candidates of the opposition received literally 0 votes, according to the final count. With more on this event is Sarah. Sarah, please.
A report of German international broadcaster Deutsche Welle states, "What we saw in Bangladesh on the polling day, in constituency after constituency, in polling center after polling center, cannot be called an election. It was a massive, unprecedented rigging operation designed to rob Bangladeshi voters of their franchise." BBC reports that its correspondent saw filled-out ballot boxes at the polling center even before polls started in the early morning. They also added that some of the election center doors were closed and people were not allowed to cast their vote. On the night before the election, the ruling party men stuffed ballot boxes in many centers. British journalist David Bergman claimed to have collected a document from the Bangladesh police headquarters. That leaked document revealed an elaborate plan to rig the election nationwide. The document was titled as "How to Win the 11th Bangladesh General Election, strictly for Bangladesh Awami League." The document suggests some vital strategies, such as, instead of neutral polling, employing core Awami League polling officers, strict policing, and slow vote casting. The actual reported events on the polling day seem to substantiate the authenticity of the document. Analyzing numerous credible reports and video footages that appeared in the international and local media, as well as collected from the ground, it appears to Australia 24 News that the reported mass rigging was executed in several well-planned strategies. Reports show that through a countrywide mass arrest of opposition polling agents before the election gave the ruling party an absolute control over the polling stations for unprecedented vote rigging. Local media reported that opposition polling agents were obstructed to enter into or beaten up and kicked out of the polling centers by the ruling party men. Election Commissioner Mahbub Talukdar said he did not find any opposition party polling agents at the center. A Dhaka-based prominent media independently observed nearly 200 polling centers across the capital and said they hardly found any polling agents of the opposition parties. It was even reported that some of the voters were forced to vote for the ruling party in front of its activists. Moreover, some unverified sources informed that the day before the election polling, presiding officers were taken to confinement and were forced to implement Awami League's vote rigging plan. The opposition coalition led by Dr. Kamal Hossain rejected the lopsided polls. They are now demanding a free and fair election under a neutral caretaker government. However, the government denies all opposition claims and maintains the election was free and fair. However, UN, USA, UK, EU, Norway, and other countries have issued statements criticizing the vote rigging that invalidated the government's narrative. They called for a probe into Bangladesh elections. United Nations said reports suggest that violent attacks and intimidation, including against minorities, have been disproportionately carried out by ruling party activists, at times with complacency or involvement of law enforcement officers. The United Nations called on the authorities to take urgent measures to prevent further reprisals. The European Union stated violence has marred the election day and significant obstacles to level the playing field remained in place throughout the process and have tainted the electoral campaign and the vote. The UK government said, "I am aware of credible accounts of obstacles, including arrests, that constrained or prevented campaigning by opposition parties and the irregularities in the conduct of elections on polling day that prevented some people from voting. I urge a full, credible, and transparent resolution of all complaints related to the conduct of these elections." The U.S. government stated, "We know with concern credible reports of harassment, intimidation, and violence in the pre-election period that made it difficult for many opposition candidates and their supporters to meet, hold rallies, and campaign freely. We are also concerned that Election Day irregularities prevented some people from voting, which undermined faith in the electoral process." Norway said, given the significant number of claims of irregularities, it is essential that these are investigated fully and transparently by the proper authorities. However, countries like India and China are supporting the Bangladesh government's position. The saddest part of this whole scenario is the pre- and post-election nationwide violence, which caused many deaths. In the aftermath of this election, now general people are feeling insecure. A mother of 4 was raped by more than 10 Awami League activists after the election. According to local media reports, her only fault was to vote for the opposition, defying the demand of the ruling party men. Opposition leader Mirza Fakhrul visited the victim. Sydney Bangladeshi people demonstrated a human chain demanding proper justice of those Awami League activists. In another district, a journalist, Hadith Hossein Molla, was arrested for reporting some electoral discrepancies. Although Sheikh Hasina's ruling coalition secured 288 out of 300 seats in this process, suffering serious legitimacy crisis domestically as well as internationally. The Washington Post suggests the kind of margin of victory is a result one might expect in a place like North Korea, but not in any democratic nation. The Economist says Bangladesh's prime minister wins a 4th term in ruthless fashion. The Asian Tribune says, "Can the Iron Lady Sheikh Hasina afford another fake election?" Bangladesh opposition leader Dr. Kamal Hossain says, "International communities shouldn't recognize the new government."
Thank you, Sarah. It appears that most people of the country are surprised and unhappy with the outcome. The international community is now also very concerned over the appalling human rights situation and rising authoritarianism in Bangladesh. It seems that if the government doesn't comply with the opposition's demand and arrange a free and fair election under neutral caretaker government, the country can fall into a grave uncertainty leading to a newly intensified spat of opposition, violence, and bloodshed.